We walk through our daily lives wrapped in a fragile, comforting illusion of absolute safety. We wake up, we lock our doors, we walk down the same familiar streets, and we blindly believe that the ground beneath our feet will remain solid. We trust that the sky above our heads will not fall. But fate has a terrifying, unpredictable way of reminding us just how quickly everything can change. A single unseen second, a minor, almost invisible miscalculation in the machinery of the world, a random twist of destiny. That's all it takes to cross the invisible line between a normal, mundane Tuesday and absolute, unforgiving tragedy. The Grim Reaper does not announce his arrival. He waits patiently in the blind spots of our lives. Welcome back to Chilling Records. Tonight, we have unearthed raw, completely unfiltered moments captured from across the globe. Moments where ordinary, unsuspecting people came face to face with the endless abyss. Sit back in your seat, take a deep, long breath, and prepare yourself psychologically. Because what you are about to witness will make you question every single step you take from this day forward. Our first descent into terror takes us to the cold, industrial city of Asbest, Russia. The date was the 24th of May, 2026. It seemed like just another entirely mundane, quiet afternoon. A local couple walked casually along the concrete sidewalk, their minds likely occupied with the ordinary worries of everyday life. High above their heads, looming like a silent giant, a towering building was undergoing massive, heavy renovations. The cold wind howled aggressively through the rusted metal scaffolding. Below, the couple continued their path, completely oblivious to the massive slab of heavy roofing material that had just snapped free from its weakened moorings. Gravity, a silent and relentless killer, took over instantly. Hundreds of pounds of unforgiving, hardened material plummeted toward the pavement, directly targeting the exact spot where the couple was about to place their next footsteps. In a display of inexplicable human intuition, a sixth sense that science still struggles to explain, the woman felt the heavy, suffocating shadow of death descending upon them. With only a fraction of a microscopic second to spare, her survival instinct hijacked her body. She aggressively yanked her partner backward by his jacket. The monstrous piece of roofing violently smashed into the pavement, sending a deafening shockwave of sharp debris and thick dust into the cold air. If she had hesitated for even a single millisecond, if she had taken one more breath before acting, the outcome would have been a gruesome, unspeakable tragedy. They stood there, frozen in utter disbelief, hearts pounding aggressively out of their chests, staring endlessly at the shattered concrete that was almost their final resting place. Far away from the cold concrete of Russia, deep in the lush, unforgiving, and remote landscapes of Cauca, Colombia, a group of young men decided to test their luck against the raw, untamed power of nature. Ignoring explicit, desperate warnings from the locals, they aggressively built a makeshift, unstable dam across a fast-flowing, treacherous river. They were desperate to carve out a quiet, relaxing swimming hole for themselves on a hot day. But water is an apex predator. It does not negotiate. It does not feel pity. The immense, crushing, relentless pressure of the deep river built up relentlessly against the weak, amateur barricade. The men laughed, splashed, and swam in the murky water, entirely unaware of the catastrophic structural failure that was silently happening beneath the dark surface.
Dios mío,
Without a single sound of warning, the makeshift dam violently ruptured. A roaring, muddy, terrifying wall of heavy water surged forward like a released beast, instantly overpowering the men. One of them was immediately sucked down into the churning, violent vortex, swept aggressively downstream into the jagged rocks and treacherous, invisible currents. The sheer panic of drowning, the chaotic, desperate thrashing in a river that violently refused to let him go, filled the air. His lungs burned for oxygen as the dark water swallowed him whole. Yet by some absolute, unexplainable miracle, after being violently battered and dragged through the merciless rapids, he managed to survive. He was pulled out further down the river, gasping for life. a haunting permanent reminder that arrogant humanity will always lose when nature decides to reclaim what is hers. We now move to the highly advanced technological hub of Cape Canaveral, Florida, a place where humanity pushes the very limits of science. The deep, heavy silence of the dark night was about to be completely and utterly obliterated. Inside a highly secured, restricted facility, top-tier engineers were meticulously conducting a ground engine test on the colossal, towering Blue Glenn rocket. Millions of pounds of highly volatile, explosive thrust were being simulated inside the metal beast. The air itself vibrated with immense, uncontrollable power, but something deep within the complex, labyrinthian machinery went catastrophically wrong. A minor leak, a faulty valve. The controlled, scientific burn instantly turned into an uncontrollable, nightmarish inferno. The resulting explosion was of such biblical, terrifying proportions that it sent massive, invisible shockwaves rippling violently through neighboring cities. The pitch-black sky turned a terrifying, brilliant, aggressive orange, a blinding glow visible for hundreds of miles across the coastline. People violently woke up in cold sweats, their windows rattling, genuinely believing that the end of the world had arrived. The sheer acoustic violence of the blast shattered the peaceful calm of the Florida night. Miraculously, despite the devastating apocalyptic inferno that completely consumed the testing site, the authorities reported 0 human casualties. But the haunting memory of that blinding flash, the moment the dark sky caught fire, will forever haunt the nightmares of everyone who witnessed it. In the normally peaceful town of Santiago Atitlan, Guatemala, the narrow streets are usually bustling with vibrant local life. A pedestrian was walking slowly down a narrow, sunlit sidewalk, minding their own business near a quiet local hardware store. Further up the steep street, a massive, heavy passenger bus was hurtling down the road at an unnatural speed. Inside the cabin, pure terror. The driver frantically pumped the heavy air brakes, his heart dropping into his stomach. But there was absolutely nothing. Total mechanical failure. The multi-ton behemoth instantly became an unstoppable, unguided missile of heavy steel and shattered glass, accelerating wildly toward the unsuspecting pedestrian below. Realizing with pure horror that the monstrous vehicle was not stopping, the pedestrian made a split-second desperate dive straight into the open front doors of the hardware store. Less than a second later, the massive bus violently slammed into the building's concrete facade, completely crushing the exact area the pedestrian had occupied just a heartbeat before. The deafening, sickening sound of twisting metal, collapsing brick, and shattering glass violently echoed through the quiet streets. The driver sat paralyzed, shaking uncontrollably in the mangled wreckage, knowing that a mere fraction of a second was the only thing standing between him and a horrific, inescapable manslaughter charge. On the sprawling Tin Cow Highway in Hong Kong, the flow of daily traffic is high-speed, aggressive, and utterly merciless. A dedicated highway maintenance crew was working carefully on the hot asphalt, fully exposed to the rushing, dangerous vehicles flying past them. Ahead in the distance, a massive double-decker bus came roaring down the lane. For reasons that are still terrifying and deeply disturbing to comprehend, the heavy bus did not slow down. The driver did not tap the brakes, he did not swerve. The vehicle barreled forward like a runaway freight train, heading straight for the vulnerable, completely exposed workers in their stationary maintenance truck. The subsequent impact was absolutely catastrophic. A worker standing just ahead of the vehicle managed to leap out of the way in pure terror, just as the giant double-decker bus completely pulverized the heavy maintenance truck. Inside the bus, absolute bloody chaos erupted. Unsuspecting passengers were thrown violently through the air like discarded rag dolls. 22 innocent people suffered agonizing, severe injuries in the twisted, bloody wreckage. The driver was later forcefully dragged away by local authorities, arrested on the spot for highly dangerous driving, leaving behind a massive scene of immense suffering, twisted steel, and shattered glass on the cold, unforgiving highway. In Villanueva, Honduras, the terror was not fast. It was not an explosion. It was agonizingly slow, deeply claustrophobic, and entirely suffocating. A local hard-working tire mechanic was lying completely flat on his back, wedged tightly beneath the oppressive, crushing weight of a massive 18-wheeler transport trailer. He was deeply focused on his intricate repairs, his hands covered in dark grease, completely surrounded by heavy steel. In the high cab of the massive truck, the driver, completely oblivious to the vulnerable man lying directly beneath his tires, decided it was time to leave. He turned the key. The massive diesel engine roared to life, violently vibrating the ground beneath the mechanic's spine. The massive, heavy wheels began to turn slowly. The mechanic, trapped in a pitch-black, suffocating coffin of moving steel, realized with pure horror that the multi-ton trailer was rolling directly over his fragile body. In a desperate, wild, adrenaline-fueled scramble for his very life, he violently twisted and dragged his bleeding body across the coarse, sharp gravel. He violently pulled himself out from under the monstrous tires just as they rolled mercilessly over the exact spot where his head had rested. One more second of hesitation, one slip of his grip, and his skull would have been instantly crushed into the dark earth. But sometimes, despite all human effort, survival is simply not an option. On the 31st of May, 2026, in the remote, isolated Shan state of Myanmar, an unimaginable man-made horror unfolded. Deep near the quiet Chinese border, a massive explosives depot heavily used for industrial mining operations sat dangerously, recklessly close to the quiet, peaceful village of Kong Tat. Inside that dark depot rested enough highly volatile material to completely level a mountain. A microscopic spark, an unseen chemical reaction, a fatal error. No one knows exactly what triggered the event, but the resulting detonation was nothing short of apocalyptic. The massive, earth-shattering blast instantly wiped the entire village off the face of the map. Family homes were turned into microscopic splinters and floating dust in the literal blink of an eye. The invisible, devastating shockwave violently tore through the fragile bodies of the innocent villagers. At least 46 people were instantly vaporized or crushed to death beneath the sudden collapse of their own ceilings. 70 more were left bleeding profusely, deeply burned, and screaming endlessly in the dark, smoldering ruins. The once peaceful village became an instant, horrific graveyard, a chilling, permanent testament to the devastating, irreversible consequences of extreme human negligence. Our final story takes us far away from the tragedy of the ground high above the earth to the majestic, silent, and freezing peaks of the Austrian Alps. On May 23, 2026, a brave paraglider named Sabrina was suspended for miles above the hard ground, gently and peacefully floating through the crisp, thin mountain air. It was a rare moment of absolute, undisturbed peace. But the open skies are vast, entirely unpredictable, and immense danger can come from anywhere at any time. Out of the blinding bright sun, a small motorized airplane was flying directly toward her fragile parachute. By the time she finally heard the aggressive loud buzz of the approaching propeller, it was already far too late to maneuver away. The heavy metal airplane violently struck her directly in midair. The terrifying, brutal impact instantly collapsed her delicate glider, sending her immediately into a dizzying, sickening, high-speed freefall toward the jagged, unforgiving alpine rocks thousands of feet below. The freezing wind violently screamed in her ears as she plummeted toward certain death. In a pure, panic-driven reaction of survival, she desperately clawed at her tangled gear and forcefully deployed her secondary emergency reserve parachute. The violent, bone-rattling jerk of the small chute opening miraculously shattered her terrifying descent. Against absolutely impossible odds, she crashed hard into the rough terrain and survived with only severe, painful bruises. She fell straight from the sky, brushed shoulders with the angel of death, and somehow lived to tell the harrowing tale. These deeply harrowing, terrifying stories serve as a dark, permanent reminder for all of us. We are all walking on a razor-thin edge every single day of our lives, no matter where you think you are, whether you're walking down a quiet, familiar street, swimming in a shallow river, working at your daily job, or floating miles above the earth. The unexpected is always waiting patiently in the dark shadows. Human life is beautifully fragile and incredibly temporary. Stay constantly vigilant. Keep your eyes wide open. Listen to the silence around you, and always trust your deepest instincts. Thank you for walking through the dark with us once again tonight. Till next time, sleep with one eye open. This has been Chillin' Records.